Hey, what do you know? It's time for another Keith and Aaron bullshit show.
Hello.
Hi. So, it's been a long time. Let's just say sometimes we lose files on the internet and second episodes go up in smoke. We had originally planned to do a completely different topic for our second show, but we decided to kind of stay with the format of the first one, where we're just going to talk about various pop culture projects that are in development, things that are of interest to either one or both of us, and get the other one's insight on such. So, right off the bat, I just want to ask. Now, we started the last, or should I say the first episode with the story that Johnny Depp was being courted to play the Joker in a Batman movie, and now it seems there might be a little bit more even to that. So, what did you think of 1989's Tim Burton Batman movie?
First, before we go any further, let's just remind everybody, these are our opinions. Some of this stuff is just rumor, so don't take any of it too seriously. If we, do your own research as far as whether or not it's real. Don't depend on us to tell you that it's real or not. If we have read it and we know it's true, we'll tell you. But mostly, just remember it's possibly speculation and our opinion, and so enough said.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very good thing to put out there. So yeah, folks, just take it with a grain of salt.
So, to go back, 1989, Tim Burton's Batman. Michael Keaton,
and of course, the Joker was Jack Nicholson.
Great movie. Loved it. Thought Keaton did a great role. He was a good Bruce Wayne. He was a good Batman. And Jack Nicholson as the Joker was a great mix between what Cesar Romero did on the old show and the reality of the Dark Knight comics. It was a good blend to me. He had that crazy, maniacal kind of thing going on that Cesar Romero had, but yet he was more evil, more conniving than that character. Anyway, I enjoyed it. I liked it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so my opinion, you need to understand, folks, being born in 83, the 89 Batman was my first exposure to Batman. Years before the animated series, years before I would see Adam West and Burt Ward, I saw this first. I remember it vividly because I got Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Michael Keaton's Batman on VHS, Christmas 1990. And I remember watching the movie with you that night, and I seem to recall you saying something to the effect of, well, he's no Adam West, but that kind of makes sense because that was your Batman, and so you would compare any other Batman to your Batman, I would think.
Sure.
I love the movie. Still holds a, huge place of honor on my, if I had like a top 100, it would definitely be on the list. But the reason I bring up 89 Batman and the Johnny Depp rumor is it turns out there might be more to the Johnny Depp thing than initially thought, because as we learned earlier this week, Michael Keaton is in talks to appear as Bruce Wayne / Batman in the upcoming Flash movie with Ezra Miller's Flash from Justice League. And a lot of people have been speculating about how that's going to work, but the plot to his Flash movie is Flashpoint, which rewrites the history of the multiverse, allowing characters that people like to come back and characters people don't like to die and all that kind of stuff. So it's basically going to be a soft reboot of the DC universe that allows multiple versions of characters to exist. The rumor is that Keaton will play a Nick Fury type character putting together a Justice League. And the other part of this rumor is that they're also in talks with Michelle Pfeiffer to come back as Catwoman. And that, of course, would make Batman Returns a thing that exists within the current slate of DC films. And then the biggest rumor, and the one that I'm actually most excited about when I read about this, is Michael Keaton as old Batman in a Batman Beyond movie. Now, I know most of what I'm talking about is probably doing a flyby with you, but I'm sure some of it isn't. You know a little bit about Batman Beyond, because I've told you about it. You may or may not have watched episodes with me years ago. I don't know. So yeah, what do you think of the idea of them retroactively making these Michael Keaton movies part of the new DC canon?
Well, I don't know that it's a problem. Haven't been terribly impressed with a whole lot of what DC did outside of what DC's done these last few years, outside of Aquaman and Wonder Woman,
which were both great. Shazam was also good.
Shazam was good. But as far as what they've done with Batman, Superman, no, I'm just not impressed. Although I'm sure there are lots of people out there who liked it. That's great. That's fine. Never been a big DC fan. While I've enjoyed the occasional Batman, Superman thing, growing up, when I grew up, Batman and Superman were relegated to TV shows that were cheesy at best. The old George Reeves TV show was our Superman. The Adam West was our Batman. So I kind of take it all with a grain of salt. I don't know that they necessarily, none of this was bad movies. They just weren't what I would have done in the same situation probably, but I forget what the question was. I rambled.
Yeah, it's all right. The question was, what do you think of the idea of Keaton in a Batman Beyond movie where he would play old Bruce Wayne?
Well, I think it'd be great, especially if he's going to do a handoff kind of thing to a new Batman. I think that's a great idea. It goes back to the heart of this DC thing if they go back to Michael Keaton to hand it off.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, not the Christian Bale and Ben Affleck and was there another one?
Yeah, there were two more. George Clooney and Val Kilmer.
Yeah. All of them did pretty good jobs with it, but
Keaton's probably...
Keaton's my pick of all of those guys.
I agree. The whole thing that brought us back around to this topic of conversation, though, was the Johnny Depp thing.
Yeah.
So, apparently, attached to all these other rumors that are out there that I've already brought up, the Batman Beyond movie is supposedly going to be a live-action adaptation of Return of the Joker, which would see Tim Burton directing this live-action adaptation of an animated film that already exists. But in this film, you would essentially see Jack Nicholson return as the '89 Joker, and the Joker Johnny Depp would be playing would actually be the Jason Todd mind-white, tortured soul that's got like Joker DNA or something that's basically turned him into the Joker all these years later. So it's Jason Todd, a former Robin, now terrorizing a young Batman, while old Batman is on the other end going, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. So, basically Johnny Depp being courted to be the Joker is really, hey, if we can get Johnny Depp, Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Jack Nicholson back on board, Tim Burton would most likely say yes to directing this movie.
I think we should bring Tommy Lee Jones back too and fix Two-Face.
How do you want to fix Two-Face?
Get him plastic surgery. psychological help. You know,
you want the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns Two-Face where they did that.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't care who did it. I just think it's a cool idea. When we're doing all these other things too. I mean, that's just seems like kind of a simple thing to put in there, is to have Harvey back in there, because Harvey and Bruce Wayne were good friends before he became Two-Face, and if Bruce could, you know, if I assume he was captured. It seems he was captured at the end of that movie.
Actually, he fell to his death.
Oh, he fell to his death at the end of the movie. Well,
But
maybe,
that's not to say there couldn't be an alternate version of Two-Face out there that's Tommy Lee Jones.
or maybe he didn't die. Maybe they just thought he fell to his death.
Yeah.
Anyway, point being, you know, I think that would be a nice touch too.
I tend to agree.
Anyway, not the point. Johnny Depp in that role would be amazing, I'm sure. I mean, he pretty much isn't anything else he's done.
A tortured soul who literally was tortured by Harley Quinn and the Joker, who was, you know, made to turn against the man he had treated as a father, you know. Now, granted, Jason Todd was a bit of a dick in the comics from everything I've ever gathered about the character. So, you know, you've got this guy that had a troubled past, who was taught by Batman, became a crime fighter, and then, you know, what did he get to show for it? He got tortured by Batman's greatest foe. And now all these years later, Batman's greatest foe is returning through him to, you know, wreak havoc on Batman yet again, to remind Batman of one of his biggest and greatest failings. I don't know. I loved Return of the Joker, the movie. I thought the animated film was great. It would be really interesting to see it done live action. Maybe Tim Burton is the guy to bring that to us. I mean, he's done 2 Batman movies already. We just know, and this is not a dig at Batman Returns, because I enjoy Batman Returns, but we just know we can't let Tim Burton off the rails this time. Otherwise, we're going to get more people like Danny DeVito's Penguin biting the noses off of people.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
I think most of us didn't. I'm sure there are some of you out there that did. I love Danny DeVito as the Penguin, but I just felt like that was a little bit much. But
well, after seeing Robin Lord Taylor play Penguin, there is no other Penguin.
Yeah, admittedly, Gotham's Penguin is my favorite Penguin. Gotham's Penguin is my favorite Penguin. Okay, so moving away from DC, I just wanted to get your opinion on the state of the rumor mill over at DC right now, because that seems to be a hot topic everyone is talking about. And I had a lot of opinions that I wanted to share, which I feel like I did. But moving away from DC, so this next one is pure speculation on our part also. But so they released, I can't remember if it was earlier this year or late last year, but they released the trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife. And a lot of people love it. I'm one of the people who loves it. Grew up with Ghostbusters. It is my favorite movie of all time. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, but I know it line for line, scene for scene. It's just my favorite movie. But that said, if you're a Ghostbusters fan, then you know how let down most people, and I want to stress that, most people, not everyone, you know how let down most fans of this franchise were when Paul Feig's 2016 Ghostbusters Answer the Call, yes, they've now given it a subtitle simply to differentiate it from the 1984 movie, were when that film came out. I mean, if I had to give it a rating, 2 stars out of 5. It's not that the people involved aren't funny. They are. I loved Bridesmaids. I've loved a lot of the stuff I've seen with them in it. That said, though, they shouldn't have tried to remake such a well-established, beloved movie. That's my opinion. It's just my opinion. That said, though, as a Ghostbusters fan who grew up hearing all the rumors that Dan Aykroyd started over the years about Ghostbusters 3 Hellbent and all this other stuff that he tried to get off the ground pretty much from like 1989 onward, to know that the next installment will, now granted, they'll be in it, but it won't focus on Stan's Vakeman. For obvious reasons, it won't focus on Spangler, but it kind of does focus on Spangler in a weird way. But our main four are not the main characters of this new movie. We've got a young cast, a multi-ethnic cast, a multi-gendered cast, which I think was a very well-played move on the part of Jason Reitman. But I guess my question is, knowing what I wanted when, this was being pitched 25 years ago, knowing what I wanted, what did you want from a Ghostbusters 3 if it came out? Would it have been something that focused on the main four guys again, or are you okay with this new direction that Ghostbusters Afterlife is taking?
Well, if it had been done 25 years ago, it would have needed to focus on the guys that were.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a given in my mind. I get that now, however many years later, 25, 30 years later, whatever it is, that they need to do something new with it. And I think that this probably will be a good movie. I don't have any doubt. I've seen the trailer a couple of times, and I've heard some things Dan Aykroyd has said about it. And if Dan Aykroyd's happy with it, my gosh, the fans should be too, because he's the driving force behind everything that's ever been done, Ghostbusters, except for what was done in 2016. I'm looking forward to it. I hate it's been put off.
Yeah.
But I get it.
Yeah, I hate it's been put off too. I completely understand. But while we're on the subject, I'm just curious. What did you think of Ghostbusters Answer the Call, the 2016 film? Do you want to give me? Okay, folks, he's giving me an expression.
I don't care. I mean, as you said, I like the cast. They're all very talented ladies. I don't necessarily think that. I don't even have an issue with the fact that they were in it. I would have done it somewhat differently. At least made the story better. I don't feel like the story was strong. I feel like the story was just very, very weak. I felt like
I feel like it also relied too much on the act structure of the original film.
Yeah.
So much so that there was a giant ghost at the end too. I mean.
Yeah. And then of course, was it Liam Hemsworth?
Yeah. No. Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth. Whichever one of those guys it was, they all look alike. I hated that character. I mean, I think he was just there to balance out the fact that there were 4 women starring in this movie. I don't know that you necessarily needed that to balance these women. They're all strong actors in their own right. But I feel like they had a weak story more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree.
I think if you had taken it and put it into another city,
made it a franchise,
and made it a franchise of
the original.
I mean, we saw that happened in the second Ghostbusters movie, that they franchised. Maybe this is an old franchise that's being rebooted or something, and they go to work there, doing this thing, in Chicago or in Atlanta or in Los Angeles or San Francisco. There's so many places it could have taken place that would have given it a different feel. You can't base everything in New York, because while the people in New York think that the world revolves around them, it doesn't. It pretty much revolves around everything but them. And if you have a different opinion, that's fine. That's my opinion. I've been to New York. I don't like the place. It's a beautiful city to visit at times, but it's not a place I can't imagine why anybody wants to live there. Enough said about that.
Yeah, let's move on. So okay, this is a little bit of old news, but I found it interesting nonetheless, and I know you will because it's something you grew up with and you really love. I haven't seen as much of the classic series as you have. I'm pretty sure you probably watched it all the way through. But the CW, of all places, has got the rights to Dark Shadows and is making a new TV series. Not much is known about it, outside from the fact that apparently Barnabas Collins will be in the very first episode, which the original series, he didn't come along until way, way later. I'm a big fan of the Tim Burton film. I absolutely loved what Tim Burton did with it, adding the humor. It's almost like Beetlejuice meets Dark Shadows in a weird way, in a brilliantly weird way, maybe I should even say. That said, though, I'm not as familiar with the old series. I've seen maybe the first 4 or 5 seasons, but it's so massive and it's so big. That, I had only just gotten to Barnabas Collins when I stopped watching it. And the only reason I stopped watching it was just because other things started to occupy my time at the time. So...
Sometimes it's hard to find, too.
That, too. So, I'm just curious, knowing that there is a reboot of Dark Shadows coming to the small screen, what are some things, again, our opinion, none of this is verified, what are some things you'd like to see on this new series? Like what are some things from the old show maybe you remember fondly that you'd like to say, oh yes, I want that to happen?
I don't know if fondly's the right word, because there was a time when I was probably about 10 or 11 years old maybe, when I watched that show religiously. It came on just about the time I got home from school good. And so as soon as I walked in the house, I'm grabbing a snack and I'm sitting down to watch Dark Shadows. And I remember a series of episodes with Quentin Collins. I can't remember the actor's name. David Selby played Quentin Collins. Brilliant actor. And Quentin, of course, was cursed as a werewolf. And so, of course, you didn't... They're very careful. You never saw him as a werewolf. You just saw the havoc he caused as a werewolf. But they had found I can't remember the lady's name. The doctor that was kind of a witch. I should have all this in front of me, but I don't. Anyway, she had come up with a cure for being a vampire. And they had to find this severed hand, the hand of Count Petofi. And that was a big part of a whole series of episodes for several weeks. Was so-and-so's got the hand. It's in this case. You open up this very ornate case, and inside in velvet lies this hand. And the idea was that they could get this hand and say the right incantation while the hand is laying on Quentin's heart, and it would pull the curse from his body. And of course, every time they'd almost get the thing, they'd lose it. Well, at this particular time, my dad had built a small cottage at the coast. It's a couple hours away, and we would go down and work on it on the weekends. And so we go down there, and there was a little cove that came in right at the base of the hill there where the house was. And we had our boat down there in that cove. And my dad sends me and my older brother, who was 9 years older than me at the time, down there with a lantern, a gas lantern. So you can imagine the eerie glow that comes off this thing. We're headed down that way to check on the boat. And, of course, it's pitch dark. And we get down there, and just as we're descending the hill, we get to the edge of the water, and all I see are 4 fingers floating right in front of me.
Oh.
And I turned and ran, screaming, back toward the house. It's the closest light I could see. But I made the mistake of carrying the lantern with me. My brother was stuck. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what I had seen. He eventually turned around and followed me back up the hill, and came and got the lantern and went back down there and pulled an old glove out of the water.
How silly did you
I'm
feel?
sorry. I felt silly, yes, but that thing scared the crap out of me. Anyway, great series of episodes. I remember it well. It was, it was several years in, several seasons in, but that's one of my great memories of that show. It was that ingrained in me,
and that compelling.
I love it. I love the movie. The Tim Burton movie was fun. It was cheesy, but hey, the show was cheesy too. The show, oh my God, the acting was gruesome. You constantly see the shadow of microphones, or you'd see the microphones.
So are you hoping that they keep that aesthetic for the new show? Like, do you want to be able to see all those errors?
Nah, probably not.
Okay.
I don't think I'd be as forgiving today as I was back then.
Because back then they were working on a budget of the 60s, and
plus they were doing it live.
Oh, that's true.
They were doing it live on TV, just like any other soap opera of the day. So that's my thing with Dark Shadows. I absolutely love it. I look forward to this show. I hope it's as good as I hope it will be. That's all I can say. I'm definitely going to give it a try.
Okay, great. All right, so this next topic is something fairly new. I grew up with this. It is there are some of my favorite movies ever made. My dad has a little bit of a different opinion, as you'll see. But they're making, or they have made, and it's going to be released supposedly in August. I guess we'll have to wait and see if it gets rescheduled again. But they have made Bill and Ted Face the Music, the third installment of the Bill and Ted franchise. And as a lifelong Bill and Ted fan who for years has wanted a third film, I'm stoked. They've got the director of Galaxy Quest as their director, and they've got the original writers back on board too, plus of course Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter. So I guess my question is, having seen the trailer, what do you think? Any thoughts about Bill and Ted Face the Music?
Actually, I'm kind of interested to see it.
Really?
Yeah. I think it will might give me a better opinion of the originals. I don't know. It just, having watched the trailer, I admit to curiosity.
Okay.
I'll just put it that way.
I mean, I will say this. The very first thing you see in the trailer that immediately makes me go, this is different from the first two movies, is the line where, you know, they're basically confronted in the future by the future council, you know, and they're like, what do you have to say for yourselves? And they, you know, of course, say their iconic lines, be excellent to each other and party on, dudes, and they just look at them like, that ain't gonna cut it anymore.
Yeah, we need more.
And that immediately tells me, oh, this is not the Bill and Ted are the two great ones, you know, this is not the this is not the hero worship from the first two films. This is something completely different, and I like that it's different. I think that that's going to bode well for it doing well, hopefully. It's currently scheduled for like the 28th of August. We'll see if they have to move it again. I hope they don't, because I really do want to see it. But I'm anxious. I'm very anxious. I will say this. One of the things I brought up to you that I'm going to bring up again here that I think our listeners could find interesting is the end of the second film, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. as they're playing God Gave Rock and Roll on stage, and you think, okay, all is well now, they suddenly have all these newspaper headlines and magazine headlines, things like Wild Stallions Stop World Hunger, and all this other stuff that alludes to the fact that, hey, look, it's all working out like it was supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Ed Solomon, one of the original writers, tweeted after the trailer came out that certain jokes from the end credits of the second film will not be acknowledged as canon for the third film. In other words, those were jokes done by the director or the editor or someone that they did not write, and as a result, none of those clippings from the end of the film are going to be acknowledged as canon in this third film. And the reasoning behind that, because someone, of course, asked the question after he posted this, why aren't you acknowledging it? He says, the whole point of this third film is to say that all these years have gone by and they have not fixed anything. Therefore, if we acknowledge those credits from the end of the second film, we have to say that they have already fixed things and suddenly they should be living in a utopia, and clearly they don't. Which, I think that's probably a good move on their part, not to acknowledge those end credit moments. But as a fan, I was kind of hoping they would figure out some great way of explaining that. I mean, they're writers after all. But, I just found it interesting that was not going to be taken into account. What do you think? Do you think that was a wise move on their part?
Oh, I think you could have done something that would have negated those headlines by saying that they missed their sometime after the end of the second movie, before these headlines come out, they missed the deadline of when the song needed to be written for those things to happen then. And that the further they get away from that deadline, the less chance they have of actually being successful with the song.
That's a good point. I hadn't even considered it that way.
Because they missed the first deadline, there's a causality that the further they get away from it, less and less of these things are going to be possible in the future, at least because of them.
Right. So the next thing I want to talk about is something I only read about today. And again, please remember, all this is rumor. The only reason I keep bringing that up is because the place that I got this news from is kind of notorious for making stuff up. So the odds of this being false are probably a little bit more than normal. But nonetheless, I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was interesting. Supposedly, Disney is planning to remake several 20th Century Fox movies and turn them into PG-13 franchises. These are R-rated franchises originally, and the three franchises in question are Alien, Predator, and Die Hard. The remake of Die Hard supposedly will cast a 20-something John McClane, but also cast an older Bruce Willis telling the story of a 20-something John McClane in flashback, trying to connect it to the originals, but also at the same time making dumbing down the ratings so that more people will hopefully go see it. And of course, the first thing that goes through my head is when your main character's catchphrase for 3 movies, no, well, actually, 4 out of 5 movies, your main character's catchphrase is "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." How do you make that a PG-13 franchise?
A well-placed beep.
Well, that's kind of what they did in the fourth one, which was also rated PG-13 and is also the lowest grossing of the Die Hard movies, which is saying something because the fifth one didn't do very well either. But I found it interesting that they're actually thinking of doing this because, much like Die Hard, what about Alien? How do you make Alien PG-13? I mean, do you just, suddenly have the chest burster not even be a thing anymore? Because that scene alone would I would think, mean an R rating.
Yeah, I would think so too.
More importantly, I mean, a character like Ripley, well-established, strong female character who's been around for decades now. Why would you want to take Sigourney Weaver away? I'm not saying they would necessarily, but I just feel like they're going to recast her with someone that's going to be a lesser actress, possibly.
Yeah, probably. But who knows? But there again, I still don't see how you can make it a PG-13 project.
And of course, you've only ever seen the first Predator. He's not really a big horror guy. Anything we're talking about, I pretty much dragged him to watch, unless it was Die Hard. He liked those.
Yeah, well, not a horror movie.
Yeah, I know.
But I've seen Alien. I've seen Predator.
So, but you understand my point.
I understand why it would be difficult to make any of them a PG-13 or below.
So, moving on to the next topic, and this will probably be our last topic for this episode, but it's an interesting one, I think, especially for 90s kids. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, in a weird way, it also connects to your generation being a kid. Movie I grew up with, The Sandlot, is now owned by Disney because it was a 20th Century Fox movie. It's on Disney Plus. So are the straight-to-video sequels, which I have never seen, so I'm going to kind of try and ignore those. But The Sandlot is apparently getting a 10-episode original series at some point on Disney Plus. It's got the original creator on board to write all the episodes. Supposedly all of the original cast is on board too. They haven't said much about the plot, but the original film was such a multi-generational film in that it came out in the early 90s and was a kids movie for my generation. But it was drawing on the nostalgia of the director and writer who grew up when you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of a great time capsule in that it's a great coming-of-age movie showing what happens when kids get together and just play, just have fun. And you don't get enough of those kinds of movies anymore, in my opinion. Things that cross generations, allow fathers and sons, daughters and mothers to sit down as a family and enjoy something because the parents are nostalgic about it, the kids love it because it's for them. And my question is, do you think they'll be able to capture the spirit of that movie in a 10-episode series with these characters now grown? Because apparently it's going to be set in the early 90s when the original film was actually released.
It'll be curious to see what they can do with it. I would think that would be very difficult to do. The original writers on board, so maybe they can do something. But the 90s is when that sort of let's go down to the field and play ball, or let's get a bunch of kids together and go play this or that, kind of started to disappear. You don't see that kind of thing now unless they're in organized sports, because we've got to have some
monicum of safety,
some modicum of supervision, because we can't trust people anymore. Kids, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I understand you can't trust adults that much, but in a very large sense, but not specifically. I'm afraid that's a time that's dead. And it was a great time. I grew up in a place where there were 3 houses, and the nearest house beyond that was a half a mile away, and the nearest one after that was a mile away. And there were 3 kids that lived in the 3 houses, and the house that was a half mile away. There were 3 of us that were the same age, and there were a couple of kids that were a year or 2 older, a couple of kids a year or 2 younger, and though we all got together and we played outside, we did not, you almost never saw us inside. If we were inside, it was because someone had a new record to play for somebody, and after 15-20 minutes inside, it was either play a board game or go back outside and have some fun. And then of course there were the rainy days when we were pretty much inside alone, because your parents are not going to let you run down the street. And I say street, I lived on a dirt road that was a half mile long. It was half mile down to the 4th house, and the only paved road within a mile otherwise. It was a different day.
Yeah. But see, like, that's part of the joy of the Sandlot, I think, is
Oh, it definitely is. To watch those kids get out there and play, like I can recall being out there and doing throw together a quick ball game. And
well, I just the thing that rings,
yeah,
and we were talking about just how great those boys were together when it came to playing and really kind of bringing out the true spirit of that time period in the 60s and everything. And the thing that's so great about it to me is, okay, first of all, this is not an argument about PC. This is simply an argument about the time period in which that movie is set. And it's not even an argument so much as everything those kids did as far as the razzing and the like what's the word I'm looking for, the teasing that they did was so accurate. Like when the little league kids that actually played on a real little league field rode up, the biggest insult was, "You play ball like a girl."
Yeah.
And
something you couldn't get away with today.
No, but
still, that was of course, the fact was that in the group of kids I played with, the girl was the best ball player of any of us.
See, the thing that I always loved about The Sandlot particularly was how it was a kid's movie told from the perspective of an adult. It kind of mirrors Stand By Me in a weird way in that effect. Because you've got Scotty Smalls having grown up and become a professional sports announcer at the stadium, while his best friend is playing ball as a pro ball player. And that great shot at the end of the movie where it suddenly cuts from Scott smiling and giving the thumbs up to Benny on the field, and then it does that close up and you get that side view as the camera pushes in on the chewed up baseball, the murderer's row ball that he obviously got from his stepfather, and that great picture of all of them as kids. It's a throwback in a weird way to Stand By Me, but it works so much better in this film, I think, because Stand By Me, yes, it's a wonderful film, but I've always felt like Sandlot actually captures more about the innocence of children. Stand By Me is about the loss of innocence to me, whereas this movie is about capturing the innocence. And that's the thing I worry about with this Disney Plus series. I'm not saying they can't do it necessarily. In fact, I read a pitch. It was a fan pitch, so it's not the actual thing. But I read a pitch that I actually think could work for this series. If you're curious, I'll tell you.
Sure.
So the fan pitch was, how many generations of kids have grown up playing on that field? Obviously, you have kids maybe a generation before, or possibly even 2 or 3 generations before, right? Plus all the subsequent generations after, right? This is set in the early 90s, and one of the things the 80s and the 90s brought us was more urban development, right? So supposedly, this guy's fan pitch, if he said, if I had to create a series, yes, I would have the original kids involved, but I wouldn't have them be the only kids involved. I would have several generations of people who grew up playing on that ball field. And the movie itself is about finding out that some development company has bought the house that sat behind that James Earl Jones character was in, and the field. And they're going to develop a mini mall or a strip center or something there. And the entire neighborhood is
up in
arms and devastated about it. But that's when you bring in the old kids, the ones that grew up playing there. They all migrate back to this point of their innocence in their childhood to play one last game. So you got guys in their 60s, guys in their 70s, guys in their 20s, guys in their 30s, plus a group of little kids, all of them playing community baseball on this field. And the whole reason they're doing it is to try and raise enough money, because it's a fundraiser. And it's a 10-episode thing about the history of this field. And we have flashbacks whenever we introduce a character that's in his 60s or 70s. We have a flashback to him as a little kid playing with his friends on that field. So each episode is like an hour-long episode. Instead of a 30-minute episode, it's an hour-long episode all about the history of this diamond and what it means to this community. And I thought, if that's the series they go with, they stand a chance of actually being able to capture that movie, at least to some degree. But I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think that that would be a good way to do the Sandlot TV series?
Could be. That's an interesting take on it. I really like the idea. Somehow or another, in the end, they'd have to win and wind up getting to keep the field, or maybe even the developer would change his heart and build a community ball field there, an actual,
something the kids could really play
in
on,
grass,
an actual diamond,
and fencing and everything, and of course,
I think
that's like in the community where I grew up. We had a group of people who loved to play ball as they got into their 20s and 30s, and they had loved it as kids, and so they got together and they built a park where they built 3 ball fields originally. It's now gone crazy. It's got soccer field and I forget what all else, beach volleyball, and anyway, point being that they got together and they built these fields, which was great. I mean, that's what they wanted. They wanted to have nice ball fields to play on, but then you could no longer go out there and just play for fun, because the only way they would let you on the fields was if you were in a team scheduled to play, because fields like that require maintenance, and that maintenance was being taken care of by fundraisers that this group would have to maintain the field every year. And of course, then later they got the county to take it over and run it and maintain it. So now tax money gets to do it. So it's even more regimented than it was before. So, well,
I think you're probably right. Like, if they went with that series pitch, they would actually have to win in the end. I agree. And I honestly think the way they would win in the end is when the one person they've been waiting on for the entire series shows up. Benny the Jet Rodriguez. Don't you think? He should be the driving force that puts him over the number. And the person who's developing it needs to be that little jackass from the original Sandlot that Porter called. Porter said he played ball like a girl. He needs to be the developer.
Yeah.
What's the matter? You still play ball like a girl? And have some of the kids that have listened to all the stuff that's going on now in 2020 just look at him and go, like, you can't say that anymore. So, okay, yeah, I'm down for the idea of a Sandlot series as long as it's a good series. And I think that's probably one of the best fan pitches I've ever heard. I wish it was mine, because but the other show that I quickly want to talk about, because we do have a little bit of time, is so that's not the only sports series that's in development over at Disney Plus. Mighty Ducks is coming back as a 10-episode series also. And, you know, a lot of us out there are speculating it's going to be the exact same plot as the original film, except now it's going to be Charlie Conway coaching his kids. No word yet has been revealed on how much of the original cast of any of those films is involved. One would hope they could get all of them back, even if it was only for at least a cameo, just because as a 90s kid, I love those movies. And I haven't watched them in years. I'm sure they probably have dated themselves very well. But the thing is, I'd love to see them figure out a way to do something different with that franchise. Yes, you need to keep the slapstick hockey stuff and the kids being kids stuff, because that's what made that franchise what it is. But I just don't know that, you know, the idea of Charlie Conway, you know, being the coach is the greatest move you could make. I would almost make it a second tier Duck, if you know what I mean. Like, you know, maybe it's just speculating. Maybe it's Guy Germain. You know, Guy was always there through all three movies. He was the one that was always trying to make out with Connie, the pretty girl on the team, which I always thought was really funny, particularly when they kiss each other at the end of the movie and they almost fall on their butts because they're on skates and they're kissing. But you know, just because I just feel like it would be too on the nose to have it be Charlie or Fulton, because those are the two names that have been thrown out the most. Is that it's either going to be one of them. Plus, I mean, anyone who's seen Daredevil knows that Fulton Reed doesn't look like the juvenile delinquent he did when he was a kid. Eldon Henson looks like Foggy Nelson now, and that's what he is to an entire generation of people who watched Daredevil. I guess what I'm trying to say is, and maybe you don't have an idea off the top of your head, but if you were in charge of this series, how would you attempt to make a 10-episode series compelling for kids that grew up with the original plus a new generation?
That's difficult because, well, there are not that many things you can do with a group of kids playing hockey. Obviously, it's got to either revolve around something that's going on with a kid or a couple of the kids, or whatever's going on with the coach, like it did in the first Mighty Ducks movie. It revolved around Gordon Bombay's legal problems.
Mm-hmm. Which, you know, at the time, I didn't know this, but I recently read a thing about how when the Mighty Ducks first came out, and, you know, it very clearly said from Walt Disney Pictures, apparently parents were very upset by the fact that the main character, this adult character that eventually becomes this great mentor, starts out with a DUI. Apparently that made like controversial headlines in the early 90s when that movie came out.
I wouldn't be surprised, but to me that's where the whole I think that's the driving force behind the movie, is his conversion from this asshole to a good guy. And even in I think it was the second movie, where he kind of had an issue, he had to deal with his ego.
Yeah, because he had
convinced himself that he was the one that was creating this great team of hockey players, when in actuality they were doing all the work. He was just telling them what they needed to do.
Yeah, that was the second movie, because that was the one with the junior Goodwill Games. I had never even heard of Goodwill Games at that time of my life, and all I knew was it was basically the Mighty Ducks going to the Child Olympics. That was how I saw it.
The Goodwill Games were Ted Turner's answer to us boycotting the Olympics in Russia. Anyway, Yeah, I'm sure you could use a different character. Any one of the kids who played one of the Ducks back in the day could become the mentor coach, but you still got the same storyline. Why are they there? If it's just because
they got a kid on the team,
or is it because maybe they're a coach for another like a college team or something, and they do this as a public community outreach thing, community service thing. That way you could bring in older players, like college players,
to help coach the kids.
Because they have to do community service. That's become a big thing now in schools, whether it's high schools or colleges or whatever, is doing community service, which is a great thing. And so maybe that's where you take this, is you've got a college coach who was one of the Ducks, who's now come back and bringing his expertise to this group of kids that are inner city kids still. And especially in this day and age when we need so much, our kids need so much guidance wherever they're from, inner city or suburbs or whatever, because they're not getting the guidance that they once did.
I think the most interesting pitch I found, and again, this is someone speculating on the internet, not me, but someone pointed out, that the third movie, all these kids suddenly got scholarships to a boarding school in Minnesota, and several of the people that were in D3 where that happened were out-of-state kids. So you've got Cowboy, who was from Texas. You got Julie Gaffney from Maine. Luis Mendoza from Miami, Florida, who, by the way, is the same actor that played Benny the Jet Rodriguez in The Sandlot. And then this was the interesting pitch. They brought this up, and then they said, but let's not forget Russ Tyler from South Central Los Angeles, who was played by Kenan Thompson, who is arguably one of the most well-known funny men on Saturday Night Live, longest-running cast member ever. He broke Tim Meadows' record. And this guy says, what if after he got this great education at this boarding school in Minnesota, he stayed on in Minnesota, and he worked his way, ironically enough, up the collegiate to the collegiate level of hockey, to the point that he became a coach when his knee gave out when he was trying out to be a minor league hockey player. And now you've got this guy who started out in South Central on rollerblades with a special, hockey trick, the knuckle puck, where he uprighted the puck and
I remember that.
Right, and he said, and now this guy who's kind of down on his luck, but not really. He's down on his luck to the point that his college has basically told him, you have another losing season, you're gone.
This would be great, because you take that guy and he decides that he's going to take these kids who have been raised through junior hockey programs, and they really are, these kids were, these college kids that he's coaching are kind of spoiled kids. They've been coming up through juniors, or whatever, and now they're at the college level, but they're not playing to their ability because they're so jaded, they're so spoiled. And so he decides to take them to where he came through hockey, and takes them to this team, this Mighty Ducks team that's still an inner city community service type thing.
District 5.
District 5, yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And he takes them there and shows them that not everybody gets to come up the way they did in hockey, and that and makes them appreciate where they are, because these kids are learning it the hard way, because they have struggles that are outside of hockey that they have to deal with above and beyond this. I just think
Yeah.
that would be a great way. And use Kenan Thompson. My gosh, he's great.
Yeah.
He'd be funny, but
Yeah.
he's also a great actor.
And then you bring in Charlie Conway and Fulton Reed as the co-captains or the co-coaches of the District 5 League because their kids are playing hockey. And I only say that because if he's bringing his college kids to see these kids play, you see what I'm
the
saying?
coach needs to be someone.
Needs to be someone.
I just question how. I mean, I don't question how Charlie or Fulton could become the coach of this team because this team would be coached by a volunteer of some
Exactly.
kind. I question whether their kids would be on it because their kids wouldn't necessarily live in District 5.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered
in Minneapolis.
that. Maybe they're just volunteering. That way you don't have to have a familial connection to the actual kids.
Maybe too though, or I mean maybe because of the fact that they're coaches, they can put their kid on the team. Maybe I don't know. Anyway,
the only other thing I would stipulate would be Hans and Jan, who owned the skate shop in town, the hockey shop. I think they need to have left Gordon that hockey shop in their will.
Yeah.
And that's his role in the show, is he becomes the aging mentor, having taken over the community supply place where all the kids get their gear.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that just because that way he doesn't have to be in every episode.
Right.
You have the characters, that the older characters go to see him when they need guidance. Or you have some of the younger characters seeking him out for guidance because they've been told who he was to their coach or whatever. Because I think Emilio Estevez still has that in him to be able to play that character again, because it's not an overly complicated character, but he had a really great arc over the 3 films.
Yeah, I think that could really work well. I think that would be enjoyable.
Oh yeah. But yeah, that was the most interesting pitch I saw, was the idea of getting one of those kids that was not from Minnesota originally to be and Kenan Thompson by far it would be the pick, if for no other reason than because he's still acting.
Yep, I agree.
Make his co hockey coach Kel Mitchell.
Yeah.
You help me do these drills, and what do you get? An orange soda. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for our second episode.
Like, subscribe, hit the bell.
Comment if you have something to add to anything we talked about. Be civil to each other in those comments. You may not want Tim Burton back. You may not want to see any of these series coming to Disney Plus.
And we appreciate your opinions, but, keep it civil.
Exactly. All right. Well, that'll do it. I'm Aaron.
I'm Keith.
And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.